When I received the letter from my uncle's lawyer, I had no idea it would change my life forever. The envelope was thick, the paper expensive, my name written in a sharp, elegant hand. You are invited to the reading of your Uncle Henry's will, the letter read. I had never been particularly close to him. In my childhood, he had always seemed distant, polite at family gatherings, reserved in conversation, more interested in observing than speaking. Everything I knew about his life felt superficial, as if he had deliberately kept the important parts hidden. But now, years after his death, I was about to return to his old mansion, filled with secrets he had left just for me. The journey back to his town felt strangely heavy. From the moment I arrived, a sense of unease never left me. The narrow streets curved like veins through the old district. The autumn wind whispered through empty alleyways, and the crunch of leaves under my feet echoed far too loudly in the quiet. Every step felt like the opening scene of something important and dangerous. Locals watched me from behind curtains and cafe windows as if they recognized me or knew something I didn't. I told myself it was just my imagination. Uncle Henry's mansion stood on a hill overlooking the town, massive and solemn, with tall windows reflecting the gray clouds above. The building looked less like a home and more like a monument to secrets long buried. When I stepped inside, the air was thick with the smell of old wood, paper, and something unfamiliar, an aroma that reminded me of spices and dried herbs. It was as though the house itself still carried the presence of its former owner. The lawyer met me in the grand hall by the fireplace, where flickering flames cast long shadows over the walls and old oil paintings of people I barely recognized. His expression was calm, but his eyes held something guarded. "Your uncle left you an inheritance," he said solemnly, "but with conditions. Each task he prepared is part of his final will. You will have to go through trials to claim it all." Before I could fully process his words, he handed me a sealed envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper with only one sentence written on it. "The truth is hidden where it all began." I stood there, the words echoing in my mind. I suddenly remembered my uncle's fondness for riddles, his habit of turning ordinary things into puzzles. The inheritance, it seemed, was not meant to be taken easily. My first instinct was to explore the library. The library was enormous. Shelves of dusty books stretched from floor to ceiling, ladders resting against them like forgotten tools. Sunlight filtered through tall windows, illuminating floating particles of dust. I ran my fingers along the spines, feeling as though each book held a fragment of my uncle's mind. Among the volumes, hidden behind a row of travel journals, I found his diary. The pages were filled with notes about business ventures, distant countries, and people I had never met. He wrote in a precise, almost cold style, But occasionally emotion slipped through: regret, pride, and something like fear. One section caught my attention: repeated references to a secret room hidden somewhere in the mansion. The entries grew more cryptic as I read on, as though he were afraid that even the diary itself might fall into the wrong hands. Days passed as I searched. I moved cautiously, listening to every creak of the floorboards, examining every cabinet, painting, and shelf. The house felt alive, as if it was watching me, testing my patience. Late one night in my uncle's study, I noticed something strange about a mirror. Its frame was slightly uneven. When I pressed against it, the wall shifted. Behind it, a hidden door opened. The door led to a narrow corridor lined with old trunks and drawers. The air was colder, heavier. Among the dust and forgotten objects, I found a small key engraved with the letter H. It felt warm in my hand, as though it had been waiting for me. With every step, more secrets unfolded: letters from people I had never met, financial documents, coded notes that hinted at family mysteries far deeper than I had imagined. One note stood out: "Trust is the road to truth, but danger is near." At the time, I didn't fully understand its meaning. Only later did I realize my uncle had been warning me about people I could not trust, about those who smiled too easily and asked too many questions. A few days later, I discovered an old hand-drawn map of the mansion hidden inside a desk drawer. It led to the basement, where a small office was concealed beneath the floorboards. I pried them open and climbed down into the darkness. Inside was a metal box filled with keys, letters, and faded photographs of people from my uncle's past. Among them was a woman whose face seemed both familiar and mysterious. Something about her eyes suggested she was important to him in a way no one ever spoke about. On the back of her photograph were the words, "Never forget the truth." Slowly, I began to understand that the inheritance was not just money or property. It was my family's story, left to me as a challenge. My uncle wanted me to uncover who he really was and who we really were. Every letter revealed a hidden decision. Every document hinted at sacrifices he had made in silence. But not everything went smoothly. Strangers began appearing at the mansion, people whose names I had seen in my uncle's notes. They asked questions that felt too specific, lingered too long near locked doors, and once, late at night, I found evidence that someone had searched my room. Some tried to extract information, others subtly threatened me, and one even attempted to lead me into a trap. That was when I truly understood. Uncle Henry's inheritance was not just a test of intellect, it was a test of character, of courage, of my ability to decide whom to trust. At last, after completing all the tasks, uncovering every hidden room, and gathering every piece of evidence, I reached the final puzzle. In the central room of the mansion stood a sealed wooden box, its surface worn smooth by time. Engraved on the lid were the words, "For the one brave enough to learn the truth." With trembling hands, I opened it. Inside were documents confirming my legal inheritance, letters from my uncle filled with advice about life, loyalty, and responsibility, and a final diary. In it, he confessed his greatest mistakes, the choices that had haunted him, and his hope that I would learn from what he could not change. Standing there, surrounded by the echoes of his past, I realized that the most valuable thing my uncle had left me was not money, it was understanding, knowledge of my family's hidden history, lessons about integrity and caution, and the chance to discover who I truly was. As I stepped out of the mansion into the fading sunset, the autumn wind brushing against my face, I felt something I hadn't expected: peace. Uncle Henry's inheritance was no longer just material wealth, it was a story that had reshaped me, a path that taught me to be stronger, wiser, and more aware of the world around me. Sometimes the most valuable inheritances are not riches, but secrets that teach us how to live. And now, holding my uncle's diary in my hands, I knew his legacy would stay with me forever, not as a burden, but as a guide for the life ahead.
If you liked this story, please like, comment, share, and subscribe.